With the army, big business, labor, the media, the government, all in Hitler's palm. By 1935, he is ready to reshape fundamentally the German nation and German society. And Hitler's tool for this are the Nuremberg laws of 1935, also known as the anti-Semitic laws or the race laws. Nuremberg is an old medieval city that was glorified in Richard Wagner's opera, The Meistersingers von Nuremberg. Nuremberg is also originally, I think, where the House of Hohenzollern comes from, who later became the German Kaiser's family, but that doesn't have much to do with it. Because of its connection to Wagner and because it's so picturesque and medieval in Hitler's time, the city of Nuremberg is used every year for the mass rallies of the Nazi Party, which are going to be shown in Elie Riefenstahl's movie Triumph of the Will, which should be attached to an appendix video. And I would just watch a few scenes from that. You'll get an idea of the glorification of Hitler. But these laws are set up in Nuremberg. The Nuremberg laws forbid Jews to be citizens. Jews are now going to be redefined as subjects or residents, not as citizens. If you have, well, how do you determine who's a Jew? Well, the Nazis actually used the Jim Crow laws of the American South to solve this problem. The Jim Crow laws say that a person is black if they have one African American ancestor. I'm sorry, if they have one African American grandparent. So, if you have a grandma or a grandpa who is black, you're black and you're subject to Jim Crow laws, restrictions, and persecution in the American South before the 1950s and 60s. If you have a Jewish grandparent, you are classified as a Jew, and you are no longer a citizen. You lose the right to vote. You lose the duty of serving on juries. You can no longer serve in the military. You can no longer be a member of the civil service, which includes teachers. You can no longer, if you're a doctor, have Gentile patients. You can no longer be in a room alone with a member of the opposite sex who is German. There are people who are punished for being in a room alone when they're a Jewish guy and she's a German maiden. If you are married, nullified. All interracial marriage is forbidden, and all interracial intercourse is considered to be miscegenation, which is not only a crime against your own people's genetics by mixing blood, but it's now a felony offense in Germany. It is a major crime. The Nuremberg laws also cap the amount of money that Jews are allowed to own and the amount of land, the basically total amount of assets the Jews are allowed to possess. And each year after that, 36, 37, 38, the amount of property, real and fluid, that a Jew is allowed to own is shrunk more and more and more. Now, if this is the case, and you have Jews who are wealthy in Germany, well, some will try to buy their way out, and the lucky succeed at this. But most can't. They don't have the money for that. And they've got to get rid of their house, or it's going to be possessed by the government, and they'll get nothing. Hitler doesn't get rich. Hitler is actually, in terms of money, pretty squeaky clean. He benefits from the gifts of his friends, but his friends get stinking rich. If a Jew needs to get rid of their property or their gold or their diamonds, a Nazi Party leader will be happy to help them with this and give them, in American terms, a few pennies on every dollar of value that they're getting. So suddenly, massive amounts of wealth are redistributed from Jews to Nazi Party leaders and their cronies. But that's not all. Jews are restricted further and further from taking part in normal life. Jewish shops, to the extent that they still exist, are boycotted and targeted. Jewish homes must be more and more humble. Jews are going to be more and more absent from the streets. They're going to be more and more disappeared, as if they don't exist. And this is on purpose. By getting rid of the Jews from people's daily routines, the Jews become less Harry and Johnny down the street and more those ideological enemies of the race. The German people go along with it. They go along with most of what Hitler does. Pastor Martin Niemöller is a Protestant minister who was imprisoned and tortured by the Nazis. He survived them. And he famously wrote of the Nazis, "First they came for the Jews, but I wasn't a Jew, so I said nothing. Then they came for the trade unionists, but I wasn't a trade unionist, so I said nothing. Then they came for the communists, but I wasn't a communist, so I said nothing. And when they finally came for me, there was no one left to speak for me." The German people go along. They even re-elect Hitler in a yes-no vote overwhelmingly. Of course, the polls are rigged. But even so, there are still a few tens of thousands of Germans that have the courage to vote nein or no to Hitler continuing in power. But Hitler goes too far on two occasions. The first occasion is the mandatory sterilization of the mentally retarded and those with other developmental disabilities. Now, everyone knows somebody who is in this situation. Most families have members who are mentally challenged or in some way disabled neurologically. What Hitler did without telling anyone, since the medical profession was now run by Nazis, the hospitals and the institutions, the asylums, were now run by the Nazis. A new order came down to forcibly sterilize every person in these institutions to prevent them from having, quote, idiot children, unquote. So, family members visiting their relatives who are in an asylum or in an institution suddenly find out after the fact that a surgery was done that strips them of their manhood or that makes it impossible for them to breed. Now, it's not necessarily true that the families wanted them to have children in the institution, but they weren't even consulted. Nobody even told them. And this causes a fury. The women, the mothers, the sisters, the wives, the daughters, whatever, they let it be known to the wives of Nazi Party officials how angry they are at this. How dare you do this to my brother, to my cousin, to my nephew? How dare you do this to my niece? Because doing it to them, you're doing it to us. Hitler backed off. In the face of this kind of criticism, Hitler backs off. He stops the forced sterilization, and to the extent it continues, it will continue at a much smaller scale with targeted groups that are not likely to cause an outrage among German mothers. The fact that the German women stood up to Hitler successfully on this occasion and on one other cannot help but make me wonder what the history of the world would have been like had they stood up to him regarding other things. Although you never know. He was bloody enough to suppress any number of people who came at him. Now, the key members of Hitler's party at this point are the Schutzstaffel, the SS, the black shirts, who replaced the brown shirts. They are Hitler's personal bodyguard, and they're headed by the former turkey farmer Heinrich Himmler. Himmler was often called in the literature about the Nazis the good Nazi, the decent Nazi, which is ironic beyond ironic because he is the head of the secret police and he is at the helm of the final solution, the decent Nazi. He was the son of a school teacher and a schoolmaster, and he, unlike many Nazi leaders, had a higher education. Goebbels had a doctorate, but most of the other Nazis didn't. But Himmler, the head of the SS, was one of these quiet little bureaucrat fellows that you'd never notice. Wore pince-nez glasses, little round glasses that clipped onto the top of the nose. But this decent Nazi, Himmler, and his black-shirted SS are going to be the people who Hitler relies on most. They are his truest believers. The SS uses the induction ceremonies and warps them. The induction and other ceremonies of the Society of Jesus of St. Ignatius of Loyola. Himmler and the other organizers of the SS want to get the same kind of absolute dedication that Jesuits showed to the Roman Catholic Church. And they thought that by mirroring what the Jesuits did, they could achieve this. What the SS is going to do in Hitler's name, well, we'll begin to talk about next time.